while we, sorry?
Let's wait a couple of minutes till Emre joins, then we can kick it off. Till then, we can I guess start introducing ourselves. Start introducing yourself as well.
Thank you. Real nice to meet you as well. I think it's better if I introduce myself after as many people as join. Maybe you can go around and ask Jared to introduce himself as well.
Great. Jared, the stage is yours.
Or if Jared is having microphone problems. Oh, you can hear now.
Wait, give me 1 minute. I can.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Does anyone else want to go when we're waiting for you to fix the microphone? Anyone wants to introduce themselves?
Dagmawi, can you introduce yourself?
Awesome, real nice to meet you as well. Jared, do you want to go?
Okay. Thank you, Gokhan. So my name is Jared Agay, and I'm head of remote undergrad education at A2SV. It's a remote education, and yeah, that's about me. And I'm looking forward to see what you guys have for us for today, and I'm so excited to I'm looking forward for that. Thank you.
Great. Real nice to meet you as well. Is there anyone else who wants to introduce themselves, or shall we start slowly? I'm assuming the silent is it's a silent. We can go ahead. So let me start by introducing myself. I'm Gokhan Celiker. I'm the founder of Global Champions Inc. We're a mobile gaming company that uses generative AI. And then let me briefly tell you about how I came here, my life story, so maybe you can relate to me as well. So let's start with age 12. I taught myself how to code at age 12. And then I am Emre joined as well.
Hi, Gokhan, how are you?
Good. I was just giving a brief intro of myself.
Excellent. I'm happy that you already started.
Great. Lovely to hear that. All right, so where were we? We were at age 12. I taught myself how to code at age 12. And then since you most are students, I want to tell this as well. Emre knows that I became one of the top students in the university entrance exam out of 1.8 million people joining that year. And then I studied engineering in the top university of Turkey. And then I started a Turkish startup, sold my Turkish startup, moved to Silicon Valley, first Palo Alto. That's where I met Emre, actually. And then after Palo Alto, I created a photo app, sold it, created influencer marketing marketplace. We sold after 1.2 billion social media reach. And then after a while, I asked myself, hey, what is my mission in this world? What I want to do? And then I decided I want to make a world a happier place. So around that time, COVID happened. I came back to Turkey from Silicon Valley with a rescue flight. People were wearing hazmat suits and everything. They had to check my temperature like a zombie movie. They were throwing us sandwiches. And then I'm currently in Turkey. The summer in Turkey, everybody says, is way better than San Francisco. So I'm enjoying it here. And then I'll quickly give you guys a brief overview of our company as well. When I came to Turkey, I started Global Champions Game Studio, and then we started doing games. So our game Plane Evolution did over 4 million downloads. And then we're, of course, using generative AI. I think everybody should be using it right now. And then we're working on a top secret casual puzzle game project that we're also using generative AI as well. So if you guys have any questions about me or the company, I'll be happy to answer. And then if you guys don't have any questions, we can switch to the topic, but I'll wait for a second if you have any questions. By the way, in any point, please feel free to stop and then ask me questions. Like, I don't mind it at all. At any point, like, I want this to be as interactive as possible, so the people joining live right now can like benefit the most by asking like clarifying questions if you have any, and then I'll be happy to answer. So please don't hesitate to like interrupt or raise your hand or say something. I'll be happy to clarify anything. And then if you don't have any questions, the topic is how to win the hackathon. So when I moved to Silicon Valley first, I decided the hackathons would be the best places to meet new people, meet other hackers like myself, and then join the fun parts of Silicon Valley. And then we won some of them, by the way. So I'll give you a quick overview of how to like approach it as an engineer, and then how to win the hackathon from an engineering perspective, if you know what I mean. So I'll be dividing this section like around two. So one thing is the design thinking approach. It is taught in the Stanford D School, and then I attended the workshop there, and it was been like super helpful to my point of view, to my perspective. I'll give you an overview of design thinking and then how you can apply it to hackathons. And then in the second part, we'll look at how the grading works in our hackathon, and then how you can use that grading method to your advantage so that you will get more points and then be able to win better. All right. So I have a quick document here. Let me know if it is working. If I try to share it, let's try this. Super fast. Share. All right. So I'll turn off my video so that you can see the screen way better. All right. Can you see it nice and well? So let's zoom in a little bit. All right. So let's win the hackathons with design thinking. Let's start with design thinking. So Stanford D School, I'll give you the quick overview. But before we start, if there's one thing you want to remember from design thinking, it is all about talking to your potential customers, potential users, and then making sure the problem you're solving is the one you thought it is, the actual one. So I'll give you the quick overview of the steps. Emphasize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. So there are some like bullet points that you can do. I won't read them one by one because I created some like bullet points that is applying the design thinking to a hackathon perspective. So here's the step-by-step guides that we prepared. So first thing is, I want to mention this before like the understanding problem and scope. So you guys went to the website, read the hackathon rules. This should be your number one step. Like number one step is go to hackathon, read everything again and again, and then make sure you're understanding what you're trying to solve. And then the second step is you already have some problems in your life that you can observe probably. So the general idea is identify that core problem that you need to solve. And then the thing is, in hackathons, you don't want to first start with a huge problem that you cannot solve it in a time. So defining the scope is really important. don't try to solve like a huge thing in the first step. Just approach it from a perspective that you can solve in a hackathon, time-bounded perspective, all right? And then the empathy is really important here, and the research and empathy. So you should, by the way, all of these things that I'm mentioning to you right now, you should be doing it before the hackathon. So just prepare yourself to the hackathon really well, so that when the hackathon starts, you can do it way better than people who didn't do the preparation like you did, all right? So your research should be like going to your target audience that who are going to use it, and then understanding their pain points. So creating a user persona might sound a little bit huge to you if you've never done it. It is more like this person lives here, this age, and then this gender, or if you don't have to use gender, does this, and then try to put yourself in their shoes, and then how they live before even talking to them. And then after you create a persona, you're going to try to find people who are somehow fit to your persona, and then you're going to try to talk with them. But the interview, the important thing is you will not try to push and sell your problem. The goal will be in interviewing and then talking to them and understanding their needs and preferences. So rather than, hey, we know you have this problem, now we got the solution, how do you think our solution is? Rather than doing this approach, go to them and talk to them in a way where you would understand them better, because you might not be the person. Even if you yourself is the persona, let's say you're trying to solve university student or high school students' problems, it is way better to talk to someone else to verify that problem, right? So emphasize with them and then deeply understand their challenges. Their challenges might be different than yourself, and their life perspective might be different than yourself. So the more people you talk to, the more information you're going to gather around the problem and around the needs that you're trying to solve. So after understanding them really well, you're going to switch to the ideation and brainstorming. So if you're like me, the moment you see the problem, you're going to have some ideas about how to solve them. So, but at the research and empathy phase, make sure you're not trying to like push the problem. Wait for the ideation and brainstorming phase to like first understand them, then switch to the ideation and brainstorming phase. So organize brainstorming sessions with your team members, and then try to generate creative solutions after you do the research. And then each team member should be able to freely tell about their ideas without criticism. So when I say without criticism, the approach is this. So someone tells you something, and then let's say team member A, let's say Emre is telling to the team something, a solution. You shouldn't say, yes, we can do it, but blah, blah. Yes, this is doable, but. So you shouldn't approach it with a but. You shouldn't approach it with a criticism. You should approach it with open arms, and then you will try to add on top of that idea. So you can say something like, yes, Emre, this is good, and we can do this. That idea as well, and we can do this as well. So approach it from open arms, and then how you can add something on top of it perspective, instead of trying to criticize. Even at this step, don't look at how it is not technically possible or blah, blah. So just try to approach it from a positive perspective. So it is really crucial in this step to approach it from a yes perspective. You will come to the, if it's technically possible perspective in the future, all right? But the idea is make sure everybody feels open to share anything they want. And then I won't go into details of those Scamper or 5 whys to different angles. You can search Scamper and read the details online, but I'll give you the 5 whys real fast. So when you're approaching something, you're going to ask why. Then when you get the answer, you're going to ask why again, until you reach to the core reason that somebody is trying to solve something or the problem they're having. The more you ask why, the deeper you will go and understand something. So let's say somebody is coming to you and say, hey, I want to, let's say, fix something. and then you ask why. It turns out they don't want to fix that. They actually have another issue that they're thinking they would use that to fix it. But when you understand the why behind it, you'll be able to solve it way better than just looking at the surface level. And then the second part is prototyping. So when you hear prototyping, if you're technical myself, you're gonna think something like, all right, now we're going to start coding, right? But it is not like that. You won't be starting coding at this step. So the idea is to have a low fidelity prototypes of your solution. So when I say low fidelity, it could be sketches, paper prototypes, or digital wireframes. The general idea is you will use those to talk to customers later on. All right, so you will not code anything, but I'll give you the example how we did it on Stanford D School. We wrote the answers on Post-its, and we put the Post-its on our chests, and that's how we spoke to the people. So it is the prototype should be very, very low fidelity, like paper and pen. If you want to do it, you can do digital, of course, but it shouldn't be any coding. You shouldn't try to build any product. It is just the idea of the product you're gonna build. Like, it just shows the product. It doesn't build the product, all right? So, and your goal is to identify, so you already identified the pain points. Your goal is to come up with some paper prototypes or digital wireframe prototypes that creates a solution for that, all right? By the way, at this step, I want to tell you the story of how we did the Stanford D School, so it might help you a little bit from a life perspective. So I'll switch back to the camera real fast if it's working, and then stop the presentation for a second to get the focus. All right, so when we did the design thinking workshop at Stanford, they asked us to come up with problems that we want to solve. And then in Silicon Valley, people have the problem of going to the dinner, and then it's hard to do parking, and then it's hard to find parking. And then once you get in, even though you reserved your seat, you cannot eat really quickly. They make you wait at the bar, and then while you drink, your table is getting prepared. And then once you sit down, you're going to get the menu, and then you're going to read the menu, and then you're going to pick something, and they're going to bring it after half an hour or something. So we were talking to each other, and people said stuff like, oh, can we solve this? Like, this is an issue everybody's having. And then we spoke to others and then came up with solutions like the parking is automatic. You just a valet takes your car whenever you approach, and then you would choose your meal even before coming to the restaurant, and then the moment you're there, it would track your location. The moment you're there, your meal is ready, and then you're ready to sit down and enjoy your dinner with your friends. But the funny thing is, we had no idea that this wasn't the case for others. So we created some Post-its and said, all right, we're going to create some sort of an app that solves this, right? So we created the Post-its and put on our chests, and then we started walking around the Stanford campus and asked people around saying, hello, I'm an iPhone app, and then we're solving your dinner issue, like the dinner issue when you would go to the restaurant and have to spend so much time to even eat your food, right? And then it turns out the more people we speak to, the more they said, hey guys, this is not a problem for us. Actually, the meal is not the goal. Eating the food is not the goal. The dinner is a get-together between two friends, and then the goal is to spend time together. So we don't want to get our meal fast. Even if you can make the meal come slower, we would be happier, because we're going to be spending even more time with our friends. When we're waiting for our meal, drinking on the bar, or when we're waiting for the food to come, we're actually conversating with each other. We're spending time together. So we don't want this instant meal experience at a dinner setting. We were shocked. So we thought this was a problem. People actually asked us to have the reverse. Hey, don't do this. We want to wait more. So it was a really shocking and eye-opening moment for us. We came back and said, all right, this is not the problem we should be solving. So I hope you remember this problem and feedback and ideation process, I hope you would like understand it deeply, and then go to your, like, whenever you think about a problem, you will talk to your customers and say, hey, this might not be the real problem they might be having. All right. So after the story time, I'll switch back to the slide. So
You can. I think like you are making a very important point here, because validating the problem that we believe the stakeholders have in hand, this is a very important step. Like in problem solving, we say the first step of solving a problem is understanding the problem. And this doesn't change in real world problem solving. So in your example, you mentioned that you had an idea and you believed that people had a problem. And when you get out, when you had conversations with people in the campus, you have actually noticed that this was not a big problem for people, or as big as you initially thought, right? And this is a very normal process in real world problem solving. Some of the hypotheses we are going to make about the world are going to be invalidated by our observations. And sometimes, like, we may feel pride in the ideas that we come up with. You know, I remember from the earlier years of my problem solving journey, sometimes I can find myself in a pride situation where I don't want to let the idea go or pivot, because, you know, I am emotionally attached to the idea. So what would you recommend? How we can professionally handle this situation? Like in case, let's say, some of our participants face with that.
Yeah. So I think that emotional attachment comes when you're like the early days of your problem solving. Whenever you're having the solution, you're like, oh my God, this is the best solution ever. Like we're gonna have so much good time trying to like build this solution, right? And the more you talk to people, the more you talk to your potential customers or users, the more you see that that solution might not solve their issue. And then even the problem you thought the solution you built a solution to might not be their problem, right? So emotional attachment happens in the first times. To be able to get over that emotional attachment, you have to talk to others and figure out, all right, so this is not the real case. The more you do it, the more you see that your emotional attachment is actually wrong. You will come to the feeling that, all right, the next time I'm coming up with solutions, this time I will not get emotionally attached to that because I might be wrong. So it gives you this like mindset of having the potential of being wrong, so that you will get, by the way, you will never get zero emotional attachment. So there is no cure to that. You will have some emotional attachment, but you can always have the framework in your mind. I hope that answers.
Oh, it definitely does. Thank you, Gokhan.
You're welcome. All right, so let's switch back to the presentation, the doc I have over here. I'm going to turn off the camera again so that we can focus on it. All right, so we did the prototyping, right? We created the prototype and we're at the feedback and iteration phase. So we're going to go to our potential users and get their feedback. So like I said, your prototype is really low fidelity. It was like post-it notes on our chest when we did it. We were walking around the campus. You can do something similar. You can go to your potential users and try to ask. And then the general idea is you should be really listening to it. You should be really listening to your feedback. Again, you will not try to sell your app or your solution idea. Your goal is to listen to them and then understand them even better from that solution perspective, right? So once you get the feedback, you're going to iterate your design based on the feedback you received. And then the goal is to continue to refine your solution so that it is more friendly, more user-friendly, and more effective. So we're going to come to the storytelling now. So from a storytelling perspective, if you have any like personal story or anything you can relate to, so the stories are super relatable. If you have anything like that, it will be super easier to relay your message. So think about the first steps that we were talking about design thinking. And the moment I told you our story, how I did the Stanford D School and the workshop, immediately, like, you understand the story, you understand how it works, and then you can use this power in your pitching as well. So my goal is to, if you're gonna have this story about your solution, then you're gonna have this journey, and then you're gonna be able to talk about your solution in your pitching as well, right? And then you're gonna look at the unique features that you have and then the benefits of your solution, then you're gonna be able to highlight them, right? So practice is everything. Like, this is really good. So in the hackathon, you will not have enough time to practice your pitch, but before the hackathon, you can prepare a little bit when you did the user research and you're trying to build the solution, like before building the solution in the hackathon, you can actually practice your pitch, and you can tell your story again and again, how you got here, how you spoke to the users, how this is a problem, etc. Right? So I suggest you practice your pitch even before coming to the hackathon. So it is more clear, people would understand it better and would engage with you better when you're listening to your presentation, right? So we all know that the user-centric design is really important. So when you're trying to build something, the UX and UI should be really simple. There shouldn't be any issues trying to use it. For example, if you're building a chatbot, for example, or if you're building on top of ChatGPT, for example, it should be really easy to see where I can text it, where I can like send it, where I can do the inputs. You can even give the users some, for example, initial prompt ideas to, like, they can just click, they don't even have to type. And you can say something like, hey, click here to get started. So it should be really easy to get understood by the user. And then whenever you're doing design decisions, you should keep the user in the center, that they're going to be the users, right? So when you're doing the hackathon, you can ask around, for example, if somebody's coding and you're not looking at the design, you can ask them, hey, instead of the default templates, default styles, you can instantly make it look way better. You can use the open source templates to make it visually appearing easily. You can add animations, and it is all available open source. You just have to search and implement it, and it should be easy to implement. My suggestion is, if you try to implement such a visually appealing template or something, even before the hackathon, in the hackathon, you don't have to learn it again. You can just focus on your building the solution, and then the visually appealing parts will already be there, right? So technical implementation is the most important part. So we're in the hackathon now. Our goal is to build a prototype. It should be really an MVP. You shouldn't, like we talk about the scope, you shouldn't try to overbuild something. You should try to build it as workable as possible. So look at two approaches. One is trying to solve many problems at the same time, but in the hackathon perspective, it is hard to do it in a short period, and you're not able to finish it. You will potentially get lower grades than someone who solved one problem or one thing really well. All right, so you should really try to build a minimum product. So it should be working as well. That's really important. Your solution should be working smoothly and efficiently. It is okay to have some hiccups during the presentation or when people are trying it, because it's a hackathon product, everyone knows it, but you should make sure it is working somehow, right?
Gokhan,
yeah.
I have a question here. So especially in the earlier years of my career, I found myself in this trouble more often. So when it comes to deciding what is needed for the minimum viable product, if we look at the words here, minimum, we are looking for something that we cannot take anything off, right? Everything has to be essential in the minimum viable product.
Yes.
And viable, it should just do the job. It doesn't have to be remarkable. It doesn't have to be perfect. It should just be viable. So this sounds easy, but when it comes to trying to do that, usually I found myself making the scope larger than it should be. Because the time is very limited, right? First, we start with the 2 days of quarterfinals. like in total, I think our participants are going to have about 51 hours, 51 hours. So how can they make sure that their scope is going to be right and they are not going to be stretching too thin?
Perfect. I think that's a really good question that everyone should be focusing. So I think you can approach it from a prioritization perspective. So when you're trying to build something, you should be writing down everything you want to build before starting to build it, right? And then you should list it in a way where the top thing you want to build should be on the number one, and then number two, number three, etc., etc. And then the general idea is you should stop building anything that is below the number one. So if the number one is not viable enough, let's say building the number one thing is not solving the problem enough, then of course you can switch to number two, number three. But there you come the problem, or are you going to be able to build this in those like 51, 52 hours, right? You might want to approach if you're not able to do that, you might want to change your approach in a way where, can I solve this in a smarter way? Can I solve this in a different way, right? So I recommend doing this approach, the following approach. So you did the like bullet items, you cut the most items as possible, and then you try to build the first item, and then if you have time left, then you can switch to the number two. You shouldn't be trying to build, let's say you're 4 people, you would go and say, hey, maybe we can build 4 features at the same time, and then maybe we can do this. But my personal suggestion is, but Emre, I want to hear your opinions on this one as well. I think 4 people, for example, should be building 1 feature at the same time, like divide the 1 feature like 2 parts and try to build it. And once it is done, switch to the second feature, because there's a chance that you won't be able to build the second feature by having not enough time. Emre, what do you think about this one?
That's a very important point, Gokhan. So like I have seen in the past many times, people ambitiously aiming for the sky and not reaching much above the ground, let's say. So it is very important to prioritize, as you suggest, making sure that we are going to deliver 1 important feature and then try to build the second one, third one after we are done with the first one. So like time is on essence in places like Hackathon. It is very important to make sure we are going to deliver something concrete by the end. Therefore, prioritization and execution according to prioritization, these are key concepts when it comes to success in a hackathon or similar time-bounded environment.
Yeah, and I think that is a really good point. I want to add something. We're going to come to grading, but the general idea is you're going to be graded by the best feature that you built and then how it works. You're not going to be graded by there's also this and that and that. You're going to be graded by the number 1 feature, the top feature, and how it works. So don't try to like overbuild. Oh, we also have this, we also have that. It will be less important, and it will actually hinder. It will make your top number 1 feature like worse than you can imagine. So if you approach from that perspective, like from a grading perspective and time perspective, you're gonna have better results. By the way, we're gonna be talking about grading in more details, but I just wanted to like talk about the scope in this perspective. All right, by the way, at this point, do you have any questions like until this point? We talked about like these. Do you have any questions that you want to ask at that point? Please feel free to ask. All right, if there are no questions at the moment, I'll continue. So we talked about it should be working, right? So I'm gonna switch to validation.
Sorry to interrupt. So this was actually about the previous section. So like being user-centric, this is a concept that we hear very often, right? And when it comes to hackathon, I would say there are two stages that we can take a look. There are things that we can do before the hackathon starts, and there are things that we can do during the quarterfinals, right? So what is your practical advice to our teams? Like, how are they going to do things in a user-centered manner before the hackathon and during the hackathon?
That's a really good question. So I think the approach should be before the hackathon, you should study a little bit about UX. So if you've never done UX, you're learning the basic approaches. I think before the hackathon, you should try to build things thinking from the UX perspective. Like the goal will be practicing the UX, build something from a UX perspective, and then try to understand if your UX is good enough, if you improved yourself. The practical approach will be after building it, you're gonna talk to other people, you're gonna show your product, and you're gonna watch them try to use it. And then when you see them fail to use it, so it's going to be obvious for you, like how to use your product, right? But if when you're showing someone, don't tell them how it works. Just observe, just watch them how they're trying to use it. And when you're like trying to use it, you're going to understand better if your UX is on par or something. So the practical approach would be before the hackathon, build something, and then watch other people try to use it. By the way, we do this all the time with games. So whenever we build a prototype, we go to testers and don't say anything, but watch how they play the game to see if the instructions are clear or it is easy to understand. And I think this applies to any product. It can be digital, it can be physical. Doing that you can call it user interviews. You don't even have to talk to them, but the idea is don't tell them, just observe, all right? You can do something similar in a sense where you can ask someone else to use your product or the solution you're building, and then see if there are any UX issues. And then during the league, I think you can ask others to use it as well. And then the general idea is if someone is having a problem using it, to see if they're having a similar problem as well. And then the challenge you have is finding, let's say, non-technical people. So whenever we are, let's say, building a game, we will show the game to someone who doesn't build games. So to be able to make sure the UX is good, you should show it to people who are, let's say, not technical, but probably going to be users of your product. So let's say, if it's possible, let's say you're going to build something for cab drivers, taxi drivers, right? If it's possible for you to talk to cab drivers or taxi drivers to see how they use your potential product, it's going to be way helpful than, let's say, you show your product to me or to Emre, because we're able to use the digital products really well. And then we're going to grasp it super fast. We're not going to be able to give you real UX feedback. We can give the UX feedback from our training, but the real feedback is going to be from your potential users. So during the hackathon, it's going to be harder. I hope that helps. Emre, do you have anything you want to ask at that point, or anyone else?
It does. Thank you.
Perfect. All right then. So we're at the
Sorry,
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, you mentioned doing the UX and the interviews for the UX before the hackathon, but wouldn't that be against the rules of the hackathon? If we do the part of the building the application that we're doing before the hackathon starts? Would it be against the rules?
No, so yeah, that would be like that. But the general idea is the goal is to improve your UX. So you don't have to build the same thing that you're building for the hackathon. So the goal is to improve your UX, improve how you talk to customers, how they use. I think I mentioned this when we were talking about the UX part. So you're going to be building something else to practice your UX skills. But like to answer your question, yes, it would be against the rules of hackathon if you build the solution that you want to build during the hackathon.
So just to be clear, team, here, it's okay to do something about understanding the problem that we are aiming to solve prior to hackathon, right, Gokhan? So there is nothing that is preventing us to get to know the problem better, potentially talk with the stakeholders, do an online research, evaluate similar products, right? That should be fine. But not building. So we shouldn't start building before the competition. But we can understand the problem better. We can do reading. We can do conversations, right? It should be fine.
Yeah. So the goal is to prepare yourself to a hackathon and start building at the hackathon, but you already have this like background of research, understanding, training, UX, practice, etc. Thank you for clarifying.
Thank you. I get it.
Awesome. Are there any other questions? I'll continue. You can always like jump in. So at the validation phase, you're gonna test your solution yourself a lot. You'll be able to find the bugs yourself really fast rather than showing to your user, and then you're gonna try to solve them. The general idea is with the bugs, since it's a hackathon like setting, you should make sure you're solving the big bugs. For example, if something is 1 pixel to the right or 1 pixel to the left that you're trying to solve and you cannot get it because of a border issue or something like that, you shouldn't try to solve that bug. You should focus on the big ones. So something that you would call an issue, right? And then we're gonna talk about the judging criteria. I think you should study the judging criteria to make sure what you're building fits their criteria. So there are special prizes on the website. I'm going to be showing the criteria here as well. So if you study them, you're going to have a better understanding of how they're going to look at your product and then how you can build it so that you're going to get even more points, all right? So you should make sure it aligns with it. And then we're at the presentation phase. So you build your stuff and then you're going to present it. The idea is, so the problem identification should be over there as well. Like before going to what you're solving, before showing us your solution, tell us what the problem is. And then you can talk about your studies before that, how you spoke to the customers, how they showed it, etc. And then the insights, then you're going to switch to solution. And then the important thing is impact as well. The solution's impact, if it is large, it is the better. So if you're solving, let's say, 1 or 2 people problem, then it's not a huge impact. But if you're solving a large problem, and if you can show it, it is way better to show that in the presentation as well. By the way, you don't have to showcase the design thinking incorporation. I think people would appreciate it, but you don't have to do it. So the design thinking approach gives you the tools to understand the user better and then understand the problem better, right? So if you show that it's not just you on your own come up with the problem, come up with the solution, but you spoke to the customers or potential users, then you would be showcasing how you incorporated the design thinking, but you don't have to say stuff like, hey, we use design thinking. We just expect you to like talk to your customers and do it. You don't have to mention design thinking in your presentation. That's the idea. So the more visual it is, the more you show it, the better. And then if you can do the demo live, it is really good. If it is somehow not possible, you can record the video and you can play the video as well, but it is usually suggested to like use it on the presentation on the stage at that particular moment. So team collaboration is really important as well. The goal is to work together and then win as a team, right? So everyone can talk about their idea, talk about their approach, and then you should listen to others. And when you listen to others and then choose something, I think the idea is to decide on something and then commit and then build that. The like gathering together as a team, working together as a team has its own challenges. I'm not going to go into like those details of those challenges, but you want to make sure you are leveraging each team member's strengths in your solution and your presentation. So for example, I've seen some teams try to, let's say, do the presentation word by word. So for example, someone says one word, the other one says one word. It looks a little bit funny on the stage. So the goal is not to have like everyone should be talking. The goal is if someone is like better at presentation, or if someone wants to do the presentation, they can do the presentation. If others want to talk at some slide, they can do it as well. But the goal is to have the strengths and use them to win, right? So innovation and uniqueness is really important as well. The idea is if you're building something that already exists, it's not going to be innovative. But if you change it a little bit, if you iterate on it, and then if you come up with a unique thing, it's going to be valued way more. By the way, you don't have to change everything to make it innovative. So it might be already working, and then combining them or changing them in a way where it is a unique solution, where it's like a new solution, but it doesn't have to come up with like ether. It doesn't have to come from zero. I think you already have a workshop on innovation, so I'm not going to go into like how to innovate in details. But the uniqueness is really important. Like having it novel is really important. So the general idea is when you come up with a solution, I usually recommend doing some sort of like a Google search, and then you can see if they already have such a thing, or someone already built such a thing. And then if they did, you can actually learn from them. You can learn from their product and then maybe iterate on top of it, maybe like take their like best parts and change it a little bit to make it even more unique, to make it even more novel. So I highly recommend doing your research on your solution as well to have it unique and novel, right? So adaptability is crucial. So when you come up with a problem, when you come up with a solution, when you speak to others, it turns out the solution or the problem is not what you thought. Like we spoke, like you shouldn't get emotionally attached, and then you should be able to change it on the fly. You should pivot based on the feedback. And when you, like the general idea is before talking to others about your solution, maybe you didn't have that insight, maybe you didn't have that feedback when you come up with that solution, right? But once you do, now you have more information in your hands that you can use to do something even better. All right. So with that, I wanna like wrap the first session, like the first part. Remember that like winning a hackathon is not just about the end result, right? It is about the journey, how you work together, the lessons learned. Of course, you want to win. Like the winning is the goal of the hackathon, but the skills you gain, the friendships you're going to build are going to be really important as well. So just approach it with enthusiasm, open mind, and then willingness to learn and adapt. And like from that part, like I wish you the best of luck from the hackathon winning perspective. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them about the first part before we switch to the grading. Then we're gonna switch to grading, how the mentors or the judges are gonna look at your product or your solution, and then how you're gonna grade it, all right? So do you have any questions?
Gokhan, I have one question. Let's say you were one of the participants for this hackathon. So next Friday, we are going to kick off. We have less than a week left. Like, how would you use your remaining time? Because this is summertime. Some of the participants, I'm sure they have the availability and they are looking to strengthen their position as much as possible to get their spots for the semifinals. So how would you do it if you were a participant?
So the moment like I get out of this presentation, I would start ideation and the prototype, like the prototyping in a low fidelity way, right? I would go out and talk to potential customers right away. Like I would use those steps that I mentioned, that I'm not going to go over it in this scope right now, but just getting out of the presentation, if you have to eat or like drink some water, do it. But the moment you have is like I think you should be starting it right away to increase your chances of winning the hackathon. So I would start the process, and then the part that takes the most time is talking to others, right? Gathering the feedback. So because you have to go out and like find people. So I would make sure I have enough time to be able to talk to people, because once you talk to people, then you're going to go back to the drawing board and then you're going to ideate more. Then you're going to talk to them again to make sure you have some time. So I would make sure I have enough time to talk to people multiple times. I would make sure like I have the right background to build something. So if you, let's say we talked about UX, if you've never used anything related to UX, or let's say if you're building, I'll give you an example. If you're building a chatbot and you've never built a chatbot before, I'd go ahead and try to improve my skills on how to build a potential product on that one as well. Yeah, so I wouldn't waste any time by there. Like I would use all the time I have to get prepared for the hackathon, because I heard the prices are really good. Like this might change, by the way. So this is not set on stone, but this is a rough idea of how your presentation, how your product is going to be judged on the hackathon, right? I think you're going to be provided this once the hackathon starts. So read them again. There might be some changes once the hackathon starts. So the first thing is a technical implementation. By the way, let's look at the overview real fast. There's a technical implementation of 30 points. There's innovation of 25 points. There's impact, again, 25. Presentation is 20. And then that's it, right? So let's start with the technical implementation. So with the 30 points, it's going to be divided to 3. We're going to be looking at quality of code, algorithm use, and then the system architecture. So to be able to get the 10 points, you're going to be graded from a perspective where, like, is the code clean, organized, and well documented. To be able to get the 10 points, it should be exponentially clean, extremely well organized, and meticulously documented. If you're like mostly clean and organized, you're going to get 7 points with sufficient documentation. If it's functional but like have some issues, organization issues, lacking documentation, you're going to get 5. By the way, you can even get 0. This is just a guideline. So this is just giving the judges a general idea of like how they should be grading, but they can grade it like on their subjective perspective as well, right? So the second thing is the algorithm use for 10 points. Are the algorithms chosen effectively solving the problem? So let's say you have the exceptional and highly effective use of algorithms, then you're going to get 10 points. That is like solving the problem optimally, right? But if you ask like how you can prepare for it, if you have the time to go back and freshen up your algorithms, like your learning on algorithms, it might be helpful as well. And then the third part is the system architecture. It is, again, 10 points. So is the overall design and architecture of the system coherent and scalable? If it's exceptionally coherent and scalable architecture, it is 10 points. it is like coherent and mostly scalable, it's 7 points. If it's functional but scalability and coherence issues, it's going to be 5 points, right? So for the scalability, I highly recommend using some part of a cloud, right? So you can like scale it way better. But the coherent part should be, let's say, if you're using multiple clouds. Emre, do you want to chip in on this one? Would you recommend using, let's say, Google Cloud, like Google Notebooks for this one?
Definitely. So we allow teammates to use any infrastructure they want to use for cloud solutions, and like they can go ahead with any architecture they feel comfortable with.
Perfect. So if you've never used them before, go ahead and take a look, try to build something on top of them. Then you won't have any, like, you will have, let's say, less issues working on top of them. If you do the learning ahead, it's going to be helping you way more in the hackathon. So the second, it is for 25 points. So we talked about like innovation and novelty. It should be new and different, right? Go ahead, do your research, and then make sure you have like a novel idea. If it is completely new and groundbreaking, you're going to get 15 points. It's like a huge point, right? If it's a new approach or improvement on the existing idea, you're going to get 10 points. If it's a variation of the existing idea, you're going to get 5 points. So go ahead, do your research, come up with something new, come up with something groundbreaking. But it always comes, solve it really creatively, spending too much time on it. You're going to, let's say, get extra 5 points. So you might want to look at it from a perspective, all right, how creative should I be before you even start like the building? You might want to try to get the 10 points from here, but you can also get 5 points from the standard. So you should always like balance your approach. You should, like, if you have the time and the resource and the idea, you should go for the top points, but you can always look at these like grading system and then optimize your approach. So the impact is really important. So if it's gonna have like social, economic, and environmental potential impact, right? How significant the potential impact of the project is really important. Again, 25 points is huge. If it's like significant and transformative impact potential, you're gonna get the 25 points. I think you should really play to there, because the impact, I believe the impact we can have in this world is really important. I think like 25 points is really important here as well. So whenever you're looking at a problem or your solution, you should look at it from impact, how many people, how much economic impact you can have. You should always filter your ideas on the size of the potential impact it can have. So if it's noteworthy, then if it's a clear value proposition, you're going to get 15 points. If it has minimal impact is unclear, you're going to get 5 points. So you might be losing 20 points over here if you choose something with a minimal impact or impact is unclear. So make sure you clearly showcase the impact it might have and how big it is in your presentation. So the presentations, like the presentation itself is really important as well. It should be like clear. Clarity is really important to relay your message. It should be well organized as well. So once you have the presentation, I suggest doing the presentation, like not leaving it to the last moment, but preparing it as you go, like preparing the presentation as you go, and then getting feedback on your presentation by the mentors is really important as well. You're gonna get questions, by the way. You're gonna get questions on your presentations, and you should be able to answer them. So do your research, and then get prepared to have some questions. So for example, if when you're talking to your mentors, if they have any questions, you might want to look at the answers. Judges might ask different questions, but you should have like a general idea of the thing you're trying to solve. And then if there's like a deep dive questions, it is better if you can respond to that question. So if you detailedly, exceptionally, and confidently respond to that, you're gonna get 10 points. If it's adequate, you're going to get 7. If it's vague or incomplete, you're going to get 5 points, right? So let's look at the sample questions. Application of generative AI. So can you describe the generative AI techniques you applied in your project? Get ready to answer them, right? You have the question already. So why did you choose a specific application for generative AI? It can be some sort of an impact, or it can be like the technical reason, but get prepared to answer those questions. You can even answer those questions like somehow in a title or bullet point in your presentation as well, but get ready to deep dive once you receive the question. So from an integration and deployment perspective, how have you integrated generative AI into your application? And what were the challenges you faced in integrating AI into your solution, right? So look at the ethical considerations. Have you considered ethical implications of your application? So you can always look at it from like an AI alignment perspective. So if the AI you're trying to use or build, or like the approach you're using, is it ethical? Like, is it having any issues with when you're trying to solve one thing? Are you doing something bad to someone else? You should consider that one. And then, how does your project ensure the generated content is appropriate and non-biased? So, there are some approaches on asking the AI itself again if it is like appropriate and non-biased, and generate something new based on top of that. You can have those approaches, but you can have other approaches as well. But you should make sure like it is appropriate and non-biased. So the UX, the user experience. How does the generative AI component enhance the user experience in your application? And then what steps did you take to make the generated content understandable and useful to the end user? So if you used many generative AI products lately, they have different ways to make the generated content understandable and useful. So for example, it can have inline links, or it can have like some citations that you can scroll down to. You can makes the user understand it way better, and you don't have to give the answer in a text base as well. So if you're somehow not giving it in a text base, if you're doing something else, it should be like feasible in a UX perspective as well. So from a creativity and innovation perspective, we talked about the knowledge. And showcasing your creative use is important as well. So it can be creative, but if you're not able to showcase it, you're not going to be able to get enough points. So make sure you are giving that information in a way where the judges can understand it. So it is not enough if you can feel it. People watching you should be able to clearly understand why it is creative as well. Impact, if you can showcase it, somehow people, when they say, yeah, so it is like, I understand the impact. Once people say that, then you're going to have like the real world scenario, like I mentioned you, like the Stanford D School, then it's going to be way clearer. People are going to be way inclined to understand the real world impact. So we talked about the target user base, and then talking to them. I believe giving the, like in your presentation and giving in your answer, telling how they're going to use it is super critical as well. The judges should be able to like clearly understand how your target user base is using it. All right. So this is the end of the second part. So I wanted to make sure we have enough time for your questions and answers. So I'm going to keep it open for a moment. So do you have any questions? So let's like look at it again super fast. I'll wait for the questions. So technical implementation pointing, innovation pointing, impact, presentation, and then the presentation has like the deep dive, right? So let's look at the points again.
Gokhan, I think one of our participants, Alazar, has a question.
All right,
Alazar.
So thank you.
My question is, could you tell us where we could find the document you presented from so that we could cross-check our project with the best?
Sorry, Alazar, your voice is a little bit, the volume is a little bit low. Could you repeat it again? And there's like a noise happening.
Okay, so I liked the presentation, it was good. But can you tell us where we can find the document you presented from so that we could cross-check our project?
Sure. I'll share the link with Emre and then he can post it to social media.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. And by sharing it, by the way, please remember that this can change. So those points can change. So this is the main idea, main framework. And if it changes, like you should make sure to read it again when you're provided the final grading questions, like final grading method. You should make sure if there are any differences between this one and the final one. By the way, I suggest using a text difference tool to see easier if there are any changes on the questions or the grading. So whenever I receive like a new version, I use the text difference tools to see if like there are any differences on any parts rather than reading everything again. I highly recommend it. You're probably using some sort of like a Git, like GitHub. You can use that one, or you can just Google for text difference, check text difference online or something like that to make sure you're not missing anything. So the general idea is study the rules, study the points, and then play to those rules, right? The more you play to those rules and the pointing system, you're gonna get graded better. And then I think Emre is doing a great job making the grading system public, not public, but like the open to the people who are joining the presentation or joining the hackathon, so that you can play to those. Because actually, like the judges are expecting you to do this, right? The more prepared you are, the better. I think the openness is a really good approach that helps you, helps the judges as well. Excuse me. So I appreciate Emre doing this in an open way.
You are very welcome, Gokhan.
All right, so I'll stop the presentation, switch to camera mode. If you have any other questions.
Gokhan, I have one question. So this is the Generative AI Hackathon. Yes, at the same time, like anything, running hackathons as well as building in hackathons, competing in hackathons also gets affected by generative AI. So in this new world, how can we utilize these generative AI tools so that we can build more with a higher quality, with a faster pace in the hackathon?
So I'm pretty sure it's allowed, but I want to make sure it is allowed with you as well. I highly recommend using something like GitHub Copilot in your hacking process, right? Thanks for the thumbs up. I think it is allowed. So if you start using it right now and get used to it, it's going to help you immensely in the hackathon. Most of the software engineers using it are reporting increased output and writing less boilerplate. This feels like an ad for Google Copilot, GitHub Copilot right now, but you don't have to use GitHub Copilot. You can use something similar, but that's the one I have experienced and talked to people with. So I highly recommend using the generative AI encoding part. You can even use the generative AI in the ideation part as well. You can go to any generative AI, let's say ChatGPT or Google Bard, and say, hey, I'm going to join this hackathon for generative AI. do you have any ideas? The more context you give to it, the more better. Like, I'm not going to go into details of prompt engineering, but if you approach it from a perspective where, all right, like, this is me, like, I'm in Africa, I want to solve a problem of Africa using generative AI. Do you have any ideas? If you ask any generative AI chatbot, it might give you some ideas as well. But make sure it's not hallucinating, right? It's a challenge. So make sure the ideas you have, like, you filter them, you talk to people about it, and then, like, that's one of the challenges, right? So let's say when you're doing the presentation, when you're doing a live demo, and your generative AI says something that it shouldn't say, right? It can happen. So everybody knows this, by the way. Don't be baffled by it. Don't be sad about it. It is a possibility that everyone is aware of. One of the things you can do is you can always have the, let's say, quote unquote, best answers in some sort of a screenshot, in some sort of like a thing you can show as an appendix. If your live demo somehow has any issues, be prepared to, like, show them from an appendix as a screenshot as well. But I believe at every step of the hackathon, like before the hackathon, during the hackathon, after the hackathon, in the league, you should be using generative AI. For example, you can use generative AI in your presentation as well for generating some images that you want to use. We can do it like there are some free to use generative AI image builders as well. You don't have to go and use, let's say, Midjourney. You don't have to. There are other options as well. So I highly recommend using generative AI at each step. By the way, I also recommend talking about how you use generative AI in the hackathon as well in your presentation. I think it is helpful. So it is kind of like eating your own dog food. I'm not sure if it is like too much of an American experience, like American sentence to say eating your own dog food. But the general idea is you would use the thing you're building, or the generative AI, on yourself, and you're building it. So it creates this loop that gives you the idea, like gives you better ideas and more feedback.
Thank you, Gokhan. Like, in the meantime, like, I have been making a little bit of an online research about how generative AI was utilized for hackathons. One thing that I have noticed, there are even many generative AI hackathons that have been organized. So, like, it doesn't have to be even the general use of generative AI for hackathons. Like, there is even enough content, diverse content on how to use generative AI for generative AI hackathons. So, I mean, everything is changing. The way we are running this hackathon, as well as the way that you can utilize these tools to get the best results in the hackathon. So, like, from this, what I would like to recommend to all our participants, do your own research. So have some time with generative AI tools, as well as Google, like Bard or Bing's search, so that like you can be aware of state-of-the-art or cutting-edge tools in the field, because they make a difference to you. And like, when you start using a tool, like, I will give an example. You can do amazing things with Google Sheets or Excel with the old name, right? Microsoft's name. And previously, it was a power to know how to formalize things in Excel, because you can create great views. You can get insights from your data that other people are not capable of. And this was giving edge to people and organizations in the past. Indeed, some of the best CEOs, they were very, very, let's say, qualified when it comes to using Excel. And now the whole interface has changed. There are amazing generative AI-based tools. You verbally describe what you want. Hey, like, I want to see this data grouped by countries, and I want to see the highest, let's say, application rates by countries. And your human words they get converted into Excel formulas, which are sometimes complicated. And this happens immediately. Like there is no delay. Not, some expert people are working on it and they come up with the formula after 15 minutes. No. Like you just describe, and generative AI helps you to get the insights. It gives you the formula. So this is just an example. Like everything we do, we can potentially find a tool to make it better. So in this changing environment, Gokhan, like what kind of practices would you recommend to our teammates?
Yeah, so I think I just came up with it while listening to you, by the way. I'm gonna search it if someone else said it before. So remember the famous saying of Steve Jobs that he said, the computers are like bicycles for your brain, right? And I think the generative AI is like a self-driving car for your brain. So you just input the location and it just goes for you, right? It just enhances your brain in a way like it's never done before. So I believe the generative AI is like a teammate for everyone. So it's not like, let's say you're 4 and then the generative AI is the 5th one. You're actually, let's say you're 4 and then you're actually 8 in a way. Like everyone using generative AI on their own sense, they're adding a teammate to their team by like enhancing their how they work, right? So I highly recommend getting used to it, like using them right now, right away, practicing them. And then the general idea is you can use diverse set of tools to have an idea of how other people are approaching the generative AI usage. So I recommend using, let's say, image generation tools at one end, and then different chatbots at one other end. I believe the founder of Quora has a startup or like a website called POE.com. So what they do is they combine other chatbots and then you can use them at the same time. And I believe Hugging Face's chatbot top chart has a place where you can write the same prompt and then get different answers from different generative AIs. And then you can look at it from a perspective where, or for this specific case, which chatbot is going to be more, or which generative AI is going to be more useful for my specific case. We're all like usually talking about image and text, but there's always the runway ML, right? The video generation part as well. You can definitely use that one if it's a solution for you. So my practical approach is going to be make sure you're using as many tools as possible before you're coming to the hackathon to have a general idea of how they work and how people are implementing it in a product.
Thank you, Gokhan. And like you mentioned, GitHub Copilot, are there any other tools that you get exposed to that you would recommend to our teammates?
Yeah, so for gaming, we use Midjourney a lot for image generation. I'm not sure if it is super relevant in the product phase, but you can definitely use it in the presentation phase as well. And then for the image generation, if you need lots of images like super fast, I highly recommend Pic Finder AI, PIC Finder AI. So it is good at generating many options super fast, rather than, let's say, Midjourney taking a lot of time to generate like one good thing. Yeah. I also recommend there are like, the awesome GitHub concept where people combine like other good tools. That if you search for, let's say, generative AI tools, there are some websites that you can get a list of generative AI tools in a categorized way. I would look at each category and see like who is the winner and why they're winning in their own category. Trying to understand them gives you like an idea. Maybe you can even read the reviews about them. Reading those reviews gives you some sort of expert view on how people are approaching that usage and how people are reviewing it. It might give you some ideas. Reading those reviews might give you some ideas that you didn't have about that particular product.
That makes a lot of sense. So Tim, do we have any other questions? If not, I have a suggestion for a practice. So Gokhan, like one thing that I would really be happy about at the end of this session, if we achieve, is if we can give some practical examples to our participants regarding how they can bake their idea, how they can understand the problem in hand prior to the competition. Because like we talked about this, right? It's the most important step of problem solving, understanding the problem. And there is a lot to do before we start putting solutions together, which is the part that we are going to do in the hackathon, that we don't want any of our participants to build things prior to the hackathon. That's the case. At the same time, we strongly encourage everybody to go to the field, have conversations, do a research to understand these problems better. So one thing we can do, we can get a volunteer from the meeting, and they can share their idea, and you can tell them, like if you were in their shoes, what you would do before the hackathon,
Sure.
like in terms of
Sure. I'll be happy to do that. And if there are no volunteers right away, we can quickly talk about, like, to give some ideas about what we spoke yesterday about the cab drivers, right? I think it will connect to a good point where talking to them is super useful. So Emre and I were talking yesterday about how the cab drivers in Ethiopia, right? They wouldn't use Google Maps. They would call you, like not the cab drivers, but the Uber drivers as well. So they wouldn't use like the navigation or the Google Maps. They would call you and ask for how can we get there? Like, can you please tell me on the phone how I can get there rather than me checking out Google Maps, right? And we said, hey, you can even use generative AI for that. So rather than showing them a map, you can first generate the suggestion on how to get there, and you can even use generative AI to turn it into a voice chat. And then whenever the cab driver wants to call someone and get directions, they would actually call that service, or let's say they would call Uber itself, Uber's generative AI road direction service, and then rather than dealing with the customer, they can listen from the generative AI on turn right, turn left, or it's around that area. Let's go to that area first, right? Rather than the navigation. So for that, for example, you can go and we came up with this thing when we were talking in 1 second, but we didn't go to the cab drivers, right? The next step would be, let's go to the cab driver and figure out why they're asking that, why they're not looking at the Google Maps. Is it like a thing that they don't want to look at the location? Is it because they don't understand how the Google Navigate tells them what to do? So we don't know the answer. But the next step would be go to the cab drivers and try to understand their problem, their issue. Also, the point I want to connect is this. Usually, cab drivers or Uber drivers, they listen to other people's problems as well. So if you're driving alone and you want to talk about your problem and you got the cab driver, they're going to have to listen to you. They don't want to, but they're going to be listening to you anyways. So if you go and talk cab drivers or Uber drivers or taxi drivers, they might tell you about what other people are talking about their problems as well. So it's a good place to, there are good people to talk about other people's problems, hear and learn about other people's problems from not the first hand, but the second hand. It might be a good resource.
That's a very good point.
And when they're waiting for the customers, they're chatty as well, right? That's their job. So some of them might not be chatty. Just find the ones who enjoy chatting.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So I have a follow-up question, because this is a great example, right? We can use generative AI and solve a practical problem. So within the rules of the game, because we don't want to build before the hackathon starts, what else can we do? One thing that comes to my mind is, how can we get ourselves familiarized with different generative AI tools that can potentially be useful for us? You already gave an example, right? You said, hey, try out GitHub Copilot before the competition starts. So anything else, let's continue with this idea. Let's say we will take it to the hackathon. We have 4 or 5 more days to work on it. So what else would you do? Yes, we will get the problem better by talking to the drivers.
All right, so we spoke to the drivers and they said, like, I don't know what they're gonna say, but let's assume they're saying, I don't know, like, I don't wanna look at the navigation because it distracts me. I wanna talk to someone on the phone. And maybe the reason they're not talking is like, that's not navigation, but they wanna make sure the rider is not going to bail on them. So maybe they had the issue where like they went there and no one's there because they find something else, and they want to keep them on the phone to make sure they maybe they want to get 5 stars, right? Maybe they want to, maybe from their perspective, they are giving a better service by like talking to you. I don't know. I honestly don't know the reason. So I'll give you another example. I was in the Uber, like I was a rider, and then the driver was playing with the manual stick, like the stick that you would change all the time. And then in US, you usually drive automatic, and then he was driving a manual shift, right? And then I asked him, hey, like, why are you driving a manual shift? Like, is there like any benefit to it because of the gas, like, or like your car gets, you can drive it longer without any engine issues, or like, I wanted to understand why he was using it. And all of my assumptions were wrong. It turns out the more he uses the stick, he gets more tips, because people think he is like spending more time, like working harder than someone working with an automatic shift. So the riders will be like, oh my God, he's working so hard to be able to drive this car, so I'm going to give him more tips. So his goal was to actually increase his revenue by just like playing with the stick. But I drive manual, so like I know how to drive manual compared to like many people in US. So I know he was just like bullshitting with it, right? So I can tell that's the reason I asked. So definitely talking to them is like the next step. I just want to like give another example on why your assumptions might be wrong. So once you spoke to them, then now you have the right answer. So let's assume the answer is, hey, I don't want to like look at the navigation, it distracts me. I don't know. Let's say that's the answer, right? Then you can do something like, all right, but the Google navigation or like Uber's app have the like the voiceover, like it can tell you when to turn. Is that the issue? Let's say that's the issue, right? And they don't understand their like it's the mechanical approach, like the turn right. But they want to hear something like, hey man, like on the second you should be turning right and be careful not to miss it, something like that, right? Let's say that's the issue. That's the reason they're using it. Then you can go ahead and try to, let's say, try to look at an AI where the AI would get the navigation directions as an input, and then can it give the friendly approach that you're trying to resolve? And then, for example, let's say by using Google Bard or ChatGPT, you're able to build something that rather than turn right, it will say something like, hey man, turn right when it's the time, etc. By the way, I think this is not the best example. We're not going in a good place, but let's keep continuing because we don't know what the cab driver says, right? The second step is you're going to get it as a text message, like you're going to get it in text form. You want to switch it to something with voice, right? And then you can use, for example, 11 Labs. I don't know if you know about it, like the voice generation tool that you can program it to have, let's say, a friendlier voice or attune it at different places. So 11 Labs, I think they recently released their version. So let's say if you're using the voice generation, you can look at different tools for voice generation. So, and then you can try to use 11 Labs. And by the way, this is just an example, right? So we figured out voice generation is the thing, then we're going to go ahead and look at voice generation tools, AIs, and then try to play with them to see if it's possible to build something on top of them, right? So I think this should be the approach. Play with, practice with as many tools as possible. based on the feedback you have from your potential user. By the way, if there are any volunteers, like I'll be happy to answer their questions as well. Sorry, you were going to say something?
I was going to say this is a free opportunity to get help, team. Like if I was in your shoes, I would definitely take it.
Yeah, but like bear in mind that we might not be your target user as well. I think it is really important to talk to your target users. But please go ahead, shoot any questions. I'll be happy to answer as much as I can. We can make wrong assumptions, but like we know it is, at least it's an assumption. By the way, Emre, I really want to learn why they're calling. Like, this is something in my mind now. If someone can learn why they're calling the cab drivers instead of looking at the navigation, I'll be super happy to learn the reason behind it, because like we talked about it more than we should, maybe like 10 minutes. I want to know the reason.
Yeah, and there can be multiple factors, right? Yeah. Like I would say people definitely love talking. Like I can tell you my observations about Ethiopia. Like number one, yeah, people are very talkative. They prefer talking over texting for sure. Number two, like you already mentioned, West comes. People use VPNs. Sometimes location services may not be as reliable as they are in the developed world in Africa. Therefore, they really want to make sure that you are in that location. And also, I would say there is a bit of a pride as well. So, like, you know, the cab drivers, right? Hey, like, we know the city, like my hand. So, like, I know all the places. Tell me where you are. I'm going to find you without the help of technology. So there is also a bit of a pride, maybe the combination. But these are all assumptions. Like you actually said it really well. We can make tons of assumptions here. At the same time, the best way to approach to this is to have the conversations with the real problem owners, with the real stakeholders. Having conversations with them can tell us the truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And by the way, if let's say the solution you're making, let's say it's for a company, right? You can ask people, people in A2SV. You can ask your mentors if they have the connections to be able to talk to them, right? That's what I'm thinking. So let's say you're building something for a company that you don't have any connections to. You can ask around if someone has connections to that company, and they'll be happy to help as well.
Yep, and like one thing that I have observed, Gokhan, because with our core dev team, we are currently making 6 projects. And in the project phase, we are about to start 9 more projects. So like our total project portfolio is growing with the, let's say, project count of 15 at the moment. And one thing that I have observed, once we get on the way, once we prepare a set of questions and go to the relevant areas where we can potentially find stakeholders to talk about, people are very collaborative. They like to help. Like we want to do something about pregnant women in Africa. Oh, doctors, they want to have conversations, midwives, hospital managers. But it requires us to get out of our buildings, you know. Like we are predominantly engineers, and it is easier to isolate ourselves, use technology, and do not form enough connections with the people on the ground to understand the problem deeper. So this is a very easy mistake to do on our end, you know, people who come from engineering background. Therefore, I would like to underscore this team. We have to get out of our comfort zone. Go talk to, first prepare, right? We can use generative AI to prepare a questionnaire, to prepare interview questions, to understand the root causes of the problem that we are trying to solve, and then have conversations. This is super important.
Yeah, and let's say if you're like an introvert and having issues talking to like random people, it is a thing, by the way. Let's say you're not comfortable approaching to like random people and then talking to them. there are some practices you can do. It is called, if I remember correctly, something like a rejection practice. You would go to 100 people and ask something like a question. Then you would like grow your, break your barriers and like grow your part where you can talk to other people more comfortably. I recommend doing that. If you like, whenever you're hearing talk to your customer, if you're like getting the chills, hey, how will I do that? If you have no idea, there are actually practices you can do as well.
That's a very good point, Gökhan. Like some people may not even think that this was true, but I want to share with everybody. When I was like, even in high school, I was not feeling brave enough to ask even address to random people. Like, what could be the worst case when you go ask an address to a person? Let me tell you what could be the worst case. They can confidently tell you, like, point you the wrong direction. This is the worst case that can happen, you know. They don't know the place and they don't want to say they don't know. So they can point you the wrong direction. This has happened to me in my life. But that's the worst case scenario, team. Like, you never, get, let's say, harassed or damaged by a person when you ask a question. In the worst case, they may ignore you and you are going to feel bad about the situation for 5 to 10 seconds. And it's not about you. It's sometimes about them. This is life, guys. We don't know what they are going through. Like when you approach to a person and if they don't even give you an answer, like this may be like, let's say, mood breaking. But keep in mind, like we are not in the shoes of that person. God knows what's happening in his life, her life. So keep that in mind too. It's not about you sometimes, like the reaction we get from people. It's easy to think that everything is turning around us in life, but that's not true. So, and this is the worst case scenario, team. And for me, like maybe it took 27, 28 years to realize that when you do not try something, this is a failure. Like I will give the example from dating is a classic one, right? Let's say there is this beautiful girl you have feelings for. So if you don't go have a conversation, it's 0 out of 0, guys. The success rate is still 0. But if you have the conversation, maybe she also has the feelings for you. You never know. Maybe it can initiate something. So you got to take your chances. Therefore, don't be afraid of getting out of your comfort zone, initiating conversations, understanding the problem by the real stakeholders.
Yeah, and then I think you made a really good point. You made multiple really good points. I think the general idea is the more you're rejected by trying, the more you will see getting rejected is actually not a big deal. It is normal part of life. And then the rejection might, like you mentioned, might not be related to you. But the more you try, you're better off. Like the chances of you achieving something by trying is infinitely more than not trying.
100%. We gotta try. That's how we make progress. We get closer with every iteration. I mean, we should see this as a continuous progress. Like when we are students, it's easy to think that things have a timeline in life. We start, we finish, and then we jump into the next project. Because that's how school progresses, right? We took some courses in the first year, we took some courses in the second. Like we learn, we make it better, we do the second iteration, we make it even better, and so on. So this year we are organizing this hackathon, continent-wide hackathon for the first time. And we are also learning a lot. Like there are things that we don't know. And like the reality kicks in and then we learn, oh, we should also care about this. We should take actions about that. And this is how we do it, guys. This is how we learn. This is real life. You know, if we don't get out of our comfort zone, it's not going to happen by itself. How is A2SV going to learn organizing hackathons? By organizing hackathons. Are we going to make mistakes? 100%. Are we proud of them? Not necessarily. Are we seeing them as an opportunity to learn and make things better for the future? 100%. So I believe that mindset is important. Do not be afraid of making mistakes.
Yeah, and I think this is more of something I learned in the Silicon Valley approach. So it is usually a better idea to apologize if you did something wrong rather than asking for permission. So you can like memorize this as ask for apology rather than asking for permission. So if something wrong happens, somehow somebody understands you wrong or something, you can just say, hey, I apologize, like I didn't mean that, and then you can go on. Like, don't be afraid to make mistakes from that perspective. You will make mistakes. It's okay. It's part of life. We're all born as babies and we learn by making mistakes. As we grow older, we don't want to make mistakes because of the social pressure we might feel. But it is okay to make mistakes and fix them later on.
Very true. Well, thank you very much, Gokhan, for these wise words and practical examples that we can take and start applying in our life, starting today. So, team, any conclusive remarks? Any other points you guys want to add? People in the chat room. We had a quiet crew today.
Yeah. If there are none, like, thank you so much for having me. I hope they're helpful. I'm going to be sharing the link with Emre, and then I hope it is useful to you as well. I wish the best of luck. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out on my LinkedIn or anywhere else. And then I hope one of you will win, like one of you will be the number one. There is no way everybody is the number one, but I hope like this session is useful for the hackathon and your life as well. I wish the best.
Gokhan, thank you very much. This was a very pleasant chat, and I believe it also has many practical advices that can be helpful to our participants, not just for the hackathon purposes, but for real life problem solving, like which I believe life is all about. So thanks for being with us. It's great to have you on our side, and hope to see you in future endeavors of A2SV as well.
Thank you. I'd love to. Have a good one, Mike. Bye-bye.
See you.